Okay, now I have just opened another position. This is from the game between Browne and Keres, two famous grandmasters. This is Rilo pass, as you may see, a very typical position, and for the club players to play such a position for black is really a very tough task, because there is no available active plan, and it's quite unclear what to do for black. While white will be continuing his development, he may bring his knight from f1 to a better position, he may bring the a1 rook into play, maybe white may push the d-pawn forward, so white has a couple of ideas to increase the pressure onto black's position. And the question is what black should do here. So first let me ask you this question. What do you think? Which ideas black might have in this position? And after you let me know your ideas, we will discuss them, and then we'll decide what should black do. Well, I may give you a little hint. You already know the three main rules of defense, so you may just apply them. Okay, the ideas that student suggests are to play a6 or h6, even knight to b8, or maybe g6. Okay, there are a lot of very interesting ideas. But when you face such a position, there is one thing that you need to know for sure. If you see opponent's pieces on your half of the board, you need to get rid of them. That is for sure, and this is what will secure your position. That's why black needs to take measures against those two bishops. The moves that a lot of students suggested, h6 and a6, are good. Both of them are good. And actually, even at any time in a position like that, it's good to play h6 and a6 and push those bishops back. This is what black did in the game. He played h6, pushing the bishop away. White played bishop to h4. Now again, black has a few possible ideas to push the bishop even back. So the one idea, black may try to play a6, pushing the light squared bishop back. Another idea, black may try to counteract that bishop on h4 while playing either bishop to e7 or g5. And all these three moves are good. Again, there is no single right solution. There are a couple of moves and all of them are pretty good. The main point is that you need to keep in mind the general principle of neutralizing opponent's forces that affect your territory. In our example, the bishop on the h4 is not staying on the black's territory, but nevertheless it puts pressure on the black's territory because it looks on the black's position and it causes some problems for black. In the actual game here, black played bishop to e7. It's one of the possible moves for black. Okay, I see that some students asks about the move g5, isn't it weakening black position? Indeed, the move g5 is weakening black's position, but at the same time it does some positive things as well. It pushes the white's bishop away, and as you can see on the g3, this bishop would be totally passive, and such moves require your accurate calculation, because if there is no way for white to exploit the weaknesses, it's okay for black to play g5. Into the current position, it is possible for black to play that. Okay, now I see that students ask, what if white takes on the g5? That's a good question. Although it's not exactly correct, but if you play blitz games, your opponents will very often do something like that. Now let's give it a try. What if white takes? Black will obviously recapture, and white takes with a bishop. This is a very common sacrifice, and you need to know how to react. For lots of players, this would be a very difficult task, but for you it's a lot easier, because you already know the rules of defense. So first of all, you need to realize what is the opponent's attacking idea. The opponent's idea is to use that pin on black's knight. So white will probably play something like queen to f3, then maybe he will play knight to e3 and knight to d5, trying to bring more and more pressure onto that knight. If white tries to transfer his rook or the queen to the g-file, in the current position it doesn't seem very dangerous for black. At least black always can play bishop to g7, so I don't think it will really cause problems for him. White can play bishop to g7 and then move his king to f8 if necessary, so there is nothing white can really do on the g-file. Therefore, the only possible idea that white may have is to play queen to f3 and then exploit this pin. And that brings us to the conclusion that black needs to neutralize the pin. And secondly, as always, if you see an opponent's piece on your half of the board, you need to do something about that. You need to get rid of it. So I think the best idea for black is to play bishop on e7 and on the next move to push away that bishop or exchange it. Black can then move the knight somewhere to play knight h7, for example. So let's just imagine how the game may continue. White will, let's say, play queen to f3, or any other move which he intended to play. Black will then continue attacking the white's bishop on the g5 and forcing it either to exchange or to go back. If white tries to go forward with bishop h6, then we will face the similar situation. There is an opponent's intruder onto your territory, and you need to exchange it or push it away. How can black do it? What can black do in order to get rid of that bishop from h6? That's right, most of the students suggest to move bishop g5, and that is correct. After that, you will exchange the only opponent's piece on your territory around your king, and the white's attack is over. There is nothing for white then. If necessary, you can even bring the rook there, and the next moves would then rook to e6, rook to g6, and maybe even black will be attacking on the king side. Okay, let's come back to the actual game. It was a little deflection, but anyway, I think it was very useful because we just realized how to handle the situations when your opponent is trying to sacrifice the knight on the g5 and then realize his attack. So we're coming back to the actual game. Black just played bishop to e7. White continued with knight to e3. Now once again there are a few white pieces which influences black's territory. In the particular position, still there are two bishops which look at black's territory, and with his last move white brought the knight into e3, which is ready to invade onto the d5 or maybe f5 square in a suitable moment. So the question for black would be how to exchange those three active pieces. The knight onto e3, the bishop onto g4, and the bishop onto h4. If black can exchange them, he will solve all his problems, all in once. Okay, I see that the suggestions are knight to g4 and knight to h7. Very good. Indeed, knight to h7 is possible, it trades off the bishop, but knight g4 would be better because it trades off all the white's active pieces, all of them. And this is a big achievement for black. In the game, white took bishop takes e7. White recaptured with the knight because after that he's initiating also an exchange of the bishop. Then white can either trade bishops onto d7 or white can take on g4, but it doesn't change anything too much. So in the game, white took on the g4, trying to keep more pieces into play, because then black may not recapture with the bishop onto g4, the rook on the e8 is hanging, and therefore black must take the bishop onto b5. This was played in the game, and then white continued with knight to h4. He's trying to continue his attack by all means. Although it seems like he doesn't really have too many resources there, he is still insistently trying to move his pieces there. Now the question is how to defend. Well, first of all, we can see that at the moment there are no big threats from the white side, so black may not worry too much about that. And secondly, we know that if you see opponent's pieces that are looking at your territory and they are ready to do something against you, you need to get rid of them. So the moves which were suggested by the students are queen to d7, bishop to d7, or knight to g6. All of them are possible, certainly. But if you play queen to d7, it doesn't really do anything against white's threats, and he will continue his attack. If you go knight to g6, then, well, from the strategic standpoint, white can remove his knight to f5, and, I mean, he would save this knight from the exchange. But from the tactical standpoint, white has even better way. He can exchange the knights, and after that he will play queen b3 check, attacking both the king and the bishop, and this is simply winning for white. Therefore, the move knight to g6 does not work for black for tactical reasons. Yeah, we need to be really careful while defending our position. So let's come back to the actual game. Initially, we've had three suggestions like queen d7, bishop d7, and knight to g6. If we come to realize that knight to g6 doesn't work and queen to d7 doesn't do much, then we have only last move which remains is bishop d7, and this is what was played in the game. Now black is solidifying his position a lot, and on the next move he is ready to either trade off one of the knights or to play knight g6. White continued with rook to e3. He is ready to play rook g3 potentially, and then install this rook against black's king. While the black's idea is still the same. There are those two knights which are dangerous for black, which are looking at black's territory, and black needs to do something about that. The white's knight onto g4 is already under black's attack, and black can take it any time. But there is the other knight, the knight on the h4, which is still there, and black needs to do something about that. That knight can be attacked by the black's knight from g6 or by the black's queen from d8. That's why I would say that there are a couple of good moves for black. Yeah, a lot of students suggested the move knight d5, and that is a very good idea. But actually, even if you play any other move, even simple move like knight to c6, it would be good as well, because you still follow the main idea. But knight d5 is very good. So if you play the move like that, this is a discovered attack on the white's knight on the h4, so then after that exchange, black will secure his position completely. The moves like f5 or h5, they can be played of course, but you see that before playing the moves like that, you need to be very careful. So if you're going to weaken your position even more with some advancements, you need to evaluate the consequences very well. For example, if you try something like h5 or f5, you're weakening your position, and this might be possible, yeah, but you need to evaluate it very accurately. Like if you go h5, this is an interesting idea, you're going to capture the knight, but white may try to sacrifice it with playing like knight to h6, for example, check, following with queen takes h5, and I'm not saying that this is bad for black, but what I'm saying is that you need to calculate this variation very accurately. You need to make sure that you're just not losing here. Okay, anyway, actually all the ideas which you suggested are good. Again, there are a few possible moves for black that may get rid of those knights. And if you pursue the right idea, then everything will be good. Some students asked about the move g5 for black. Well, in general, it may be possible in some other situations, but here white can jump with his knight either to f6 or to capture the pawn on the h6, so it's not going to be good for black. But in general, if white couldn't make one of these two moves, it could be possible for black. Anyway, I'm glad that you followed the bottom line. In the actual game, black played king to h7. I think it's a little too passive, and the other ideas which we analyzed, like knight to d5, could have been more interesting. But anyway, black realizes the same idea, just he makes it in a more timid way. He played with king to h7, and then after the white's move rook to g3, black played knight to g8. So he's overprotecting his position. And again, I do not think it is really necessary, but he's just playing too carefully. Anyway, it's good because he follows the right plan. He's going to attack the white's knight on the h4 and force it to go away. The other knight on the g4 is still under the control of the black's bishop, and he's ready to eliminate it at any moment. And then on the next move, black is ready to play knight f6. White removed his knight to f3. Probably he didn't want to exchange it after knight to f5. And also, let's just take a step back. If white tries to play knight to f5, then black can continue attacking that knight, and he can play pawn to g6. And then the knight will have to come back to e3, which is really sad. Then black may even continue and play h5. So here, surprisingly, the black's knight on the g8 is standing very well. Anyway, it didn't happen in the actual game, so let's just come back to the real game situation. White played knight to f3, going backward, and this is very good for black. Here black can either play knight to f6, forcing the white's knight to go away, or what he did in the game, he just took that knight, and this is good as well. He just took the knight, and after that, white obviously should recapture with rook takes g4, and after that black continues with knight to f6, pushing that rook to go away. White played rook to h4, and potentially in some variations he's preparing the move knight to g5, making this check using the fact that the black's pawn is pinned, and after that maybe white can play queen b3. Well, probably white would play queen b3 first and only then knight to g5, so it might cause some little problems for black. That's why he played king to g8, and now his position is completely safe. There is no way for white to continue his attack. There is completely no way, and that's why, I mean, we may already conclude that the white's attack was repelled successfully. During this whole game, black simply used constantly this one rule, a single rule, to find opponent's pieces on your territory and neutralize them. You can neutralize them by attacking them and forcing them to go back, or by exchanging them. This is what black did in this game, and he refuted the white's attack very, very easily. So if you do the same, if you just keep this rule in mind, it will help you a lot. As you can see, the rule is very simple. Very often there are a couple of ways for you to realize this rule and to follow it. And after some practice, you will even start doing it automatically. And it's going to be really, really easy and really effective. Okay, we will not analyze this game until the end. In the future, actually, if you're curious, here black played d5 and started his counterattack in the center, and then he invaded along the d file and he even won the game. Actually, it happened pretty easily for him.